Well, I'll try to be cool.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for coming.
It's my pleasure.
It's exciting. It was really fun doing research into your history a little bit. You've had a man of many lives, a Renaissance man, you might say.
Oh, I didn't realize you were doing deep background hunting.
Oh, yeah, the police have nothing but good things to say. So we'll just start with your name and what you do here at the dock.
My name is Sinan Demirel, and I am the Associate Director of the Existence Project.
And then whereabouts did you grow up?
Well, I was born and raised in Ames, Iowa. So my parents were Turkish immigrants, and they met, and my dad went to America the next day, and they didn't see each other for a year. He went back to Turkey. They ended up coming. My dad went to grad school, and they ended up staying in this town. So I got a Turkish name, and I was not even taught Turkish because they thought they would go to Turkey soon, and they didn't. So I grew up in Iowa.
What kind of hobbies did you have when you were a kid?
Boy, when I was a kid, I had all sorts of hobbies. I collected everything. I collected coins and stamps and rocks, and I liked building things. And then when I was a young teen, that's when I started playing music. So that became more of a hobby for me.
Okay, and what kind of music?
I like to play guitar and piano, mostly, kind of folky kind of stuff. And if I'd be a rock and roll star if I had the talent, but I just kind of stick to blues and folk.
Cool. And is that something you still are doing, I hope, as like a hobby?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What prompted you to go, after graduating high school, to get a Master of Arts in Religion and Religious Studies at, is it Vanderbilt University?
Yeah. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do or what I wanted to major in. And I ended up getting a degree in philosophy, which I think might be what a lot of people who don't know what they want to major in might end up doing. And I had a really good professor who focused on religious studies, and the philosophy and religion departments were combined. And his whole thing was the historical Jesus, and he came at it from a Marxist perspective. So I got really interested in the Bible and social justice. And so I applied to Vanderbilt, and I got in, and they were very strong in Old Testament. So I ended up with a degree in Hebrew Bible. So I like to say that, I was born and raised Muslim. I've worked mostly in Christian churches. Mm-hmm. My wife and I host Zen silent retreats. And I have a master's degree in Hebrew Bible. So when people ask me my religion, I just say, I don't know, you do the math. That's what my background is.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of realized you were a spiritual person, but not to that degree. It's like it's a wide net to cast. Reminds me of almost like a moth to the light. Like, what do you think? Why do you have this interest? Like, before we get into the other stuff, like on religion and religious studies.
Yeah, I would say my interest is in spirituality, mm-hmm. more so than religion per se, than organized practice. So to me, spirituality is about finding meaning in life. So those were always big questions for me, like, what do I want my life to mean, and what does this all mean in the bigger picture? So my motivations, I think, came from that, just to, really understand from my own personal foundation where I was coming from.
What did you do once you were done Vanderbilt? Because obviously there is it an 8-year gap between that and when you went to study at the University of Washington?
Yeah, I had a long lost weekend. So I actually went to undergrad in my hometown and got my degree, and then moved to Nashville and went to Vanderbilt for 2 years and got my degree there. And then I moved back to my hometown. And I was at loose ends. I didn't really know, who I was or what I wanted to do. And I came back to my hometown. I got a job sampling water out of reservoirs and ran my friend's guitar shop for a while, and kind of odd job stuff. And then my brother, who had moved to Seattle, was having his second kid, and said, well, we need a nanny. And I said, well, I can do that. So I quit my job, kind of uprooted my whole life and drove to Seattle. And before I arrived, my sister-in-law had changed her mind, but they didn't tell me. So I was essentially homeless, but, I had a very deep bench of family and friends, so, I knew that I wasn't going to be on the street. And I ended up moving in and living with another buddy who, he had been in an accident and broke his neck, so I became his attendant for a couple of years, and then I got back into grad school.
What prompted, so you got a doctor of philosophy and sociology?
Yeah. So I did a doctorate in sociology almost by default. Again, I was at loose ends. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had gotten sober. This was 1990. I had, gotten sober. Sort of started a trajectory downward for me that, I didn't have any crutches anymore and my life wasn't going in any direction. And I said, well, I can do social work. So I was looking for social work jobs. I couldn't get any social work jobs. One day I went to the social work school at the University of Washington, and I was looking at the job board, and I saw it was the very last day you could register late to do the GREs. I thought, okay, this is a sign from the universe. And I was unemployed, doing the New York Times crossword every day. I had phenomenal GRE scores. And I thought, I'm going to apply, like most people apply to the same department at different universities. I just applied to a bunch of departments at the same university because I lived in Seattle. History wouldn't take me because I wasn't a history major. Psych said, well, we'll put you on the wait list. Social was all about the numbers at our department there. So they saw my test scores and I had taken my history exam and took out everything that didn't say history, and my essay was like this long, and I got in with funding. So kind of by accident, I became a sociologist.
Wow, ain't that how life works sometimes? Oh my gosh. And can I ask, because addiction is something I've personally struggled with. I'm wondering if you had a reason why you decided to get sober.
Well, as I said, this is the year I was turning 30 and my life wasn't going anywhere. And I just felt like I'm never going to have a career. I'm never going to have a family. I'm just going to be alone. And, but I was going and even though my sister-in-law changed her mind, I would go and babysit my niece and nephew all the time. And I would not smoke in front of her. I think one of her parents must have, because when I got the red tin down, she knew what it was. And she said, no, don't smoke. This was a couple days before her 3rd birthday. And I smoked, and it really haunted me. So the next day I asked my brother to get me a big bud and bought a bottle of wine and consumed them all, and that was it for, it's been over 30 years. Wow. Now, I did eat the wrong cookie a few years ago and discovered that I could raise my arm over my head for the first time in years. So I do make an exception for that. It's been over 30 years since I've had a drink.
Wow, good for you. Because you've had a long history of working with nonprofits, so how did you first get involved with that?
Again, I just kind of fell into it. So I know that from my upbringing, my mother was a good Muslim and always taught me, she said, it's one of the 5 pillars of Islam to do charity and to help people who are poor. So that was kind of ingrained in me from a young age. And then the year I graduated high school, my brother had moved to Seattle. So I came for a visit. And back then, you could ride the ferries back and forth all day just for paying the 80-cent fare. They'd never make you get off back then. And I'd done that all day and got off and was walking with my big gulp on the waterfront. And I saw this guy walking from garbage can to garbage can and looking for any cup that still had something in there, and he'd drink it up and go to the next garbage can. And I was fresh out of high school. I'd never seen anything like that. And he walked by me and I didn't know what to do except hand him my big gulp. But it haunted me, and I moved to Seattle almost 10 years later, and I started volunteering first at food banks and then soup kitchens, and then I got into grad school and decided for my fieldwork class, I wasn't comfortable studying homeless people, but I thought I would study the advocates and activists and organizers who tried to engage with the unhoused community for a direct action. And I got hooked. One of my first things I did, I ended up at a police riot. And, I'm just grabbing posters off of telephone poles to write notes. And I was just hooked. And in the midst of doing all that, my parents died, and I'd started a community meal in my mom's memory and invited other SOC students to, be part of that. And I was really hooked on that too. I finished my doctoral work, decided life's too short. I don't want to be an academic, and I did applied research. For a couple of years, I ran a statewide study of unhoused families, and the report went to the governor and the legislature, and nothing really changed. So that's when I started doing direct service. The church where I had been doing my community meal, just kind of as a hobby, was starting a shelter. And I got hired and, became the first shelter director, then the first executive director. We got a $2 million grant, and that's when I left. Oh. I thought, okay.
End on a high note.
Well, and I had met my future wife, and she said, I got 2 questions for you. One is, are you ready to take care of yourself and not just everyone else? And do you have room in your life for another person? Mm-hmm. And that's when it's, hey, honey, I quit. And I'm just going to go to this other agency for a couple months. They're struggling, and we're going to right the boat, and then I'll leave. And, we can get married, and we can move to Canada, because she was Canadian, and, I'm in Seattle. It took 2 years. It was a train wreck. I found, there was a lot of issues. But we saved the organization. I ended up, staying for longer in Seattle than I planned to, but we made good on it, and we came back here.
How did the conception of the Existence Project, how did it even come into fruition?
So I joined the Existence Project after it had been around for a few years. And it was started by a guy named Marco Curovia. And Marco had some insights just in engaging with people that he met outdoors. Mm-hmm. And one of his insights was that sort of the antidote to a lot of misunderstanding and this absence of compassion could be cured if we just really understood each other by knowing each other's stories. The Existence Project is dedicated to humanizing the issue of homelessness through storytelling. And we do that in various mediums, but one thing we do is offer a storyteller training for people with lived experience of homelessness who want to tell their story. Mm-hmm. And then we provide opportunities to tell those stories in a public setting or through our social media work. That in itself is empowering, we hope. But it also has provided an opportunity for a broader community that doesn't always understand the issue or the struggles that people go through on a day-to-day life to just have a chance to see them as fully human. Because I think we miss that too often. We look out and we see problems and we don't see a human.
Can you talk a little bit about the various events, because you guys have some really cool things that you've done in the past, like music performances and film screenings. Can you just talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, we do a lot of cool stuff. So one of our avenues of reaching out to a broader community is through social media. So we have an Instagram page, we have a Facebook page, and we post stories that are relevant to this community and to the issue of being unhoused. But most especially, we use those media to bring some of these stories out to the public in short form videos.
There needs to be more help for the people that fall off in the world. People fall. Some people, they become homeless because of no fault of their own, or because they just ran out of time and couldn't find a place to rent, right? That's what happened to me 7 years ago. That's how I first became homeless. When we got to the end of our lease, we couldn't find a place and we just ended up homeless.
Sometimes in longer form videos, we did one feature film, full-length documentary called Moving Day, about when people had to leave sheltering in Beacon Hill Park with the promise of housing and what actually happened.
I actually read it in the paper that on April 1st, there was a deadline to have everyone in here housed.
Yeah, this is a community. It's almost in a kind of way like a family. If you don't have a family, We're going to work as hard as we can with everyone involved to offer everybody who's currently outside a space inside.
They weren't concerned about housing us when winter hit.
When people are going to be told to leave the park, they're going to be doing it with no water, no breakfast, no bathrooms, no support, and if they come back and their tent is missing, then their home is gone.
That's a big mood for most people around here, is just survive until March 31st and then see what happens.
We have galleries that we bring to coffee shops and churches, and there's one hanging, I think, right on the other side of this wall here at the dock.
That's really cool.
And those galleries grow out of our workshop work that we do with the broader community, with specific organizations who want to engage in doing our workshops. And those workshops can take different forms. One that is really, really fruitful is called Keeping It Human. And we've done that in sort of large public settings, but also in smaller group settings where we invite somebody with lived experience of homelessness who has done storyteller training with us over the course of a number of weeks and really honed in on their story to then tell that story publicly and then to engage with that audience.
And then what is the What We Need community workshop?
Thank you. That was the next one I was going to get to, is what we need. So what we need can take a number of forms, but one version we did was with outreach workers who worked with the unhoused community. The questions we engaged them with were around, well, what do other people in the community, or what do systems in the community not understand about what you do, about your work, and what do you need from them? What do you need from other individuals? What do you need from the systems of care that we've established? And again, we hope that that's an empowering way for people who are doing the work, for people who are engaged as advocates, for the unhoused community itself, to have a medium through which to share what they're going through. And then at the end of those workshops, we have various mediums that we invite people to express what they want to take away from these events and have other people understand. And they express it artistically. They can do it. We have frames that are thought bubbles, frames that are speech bubbles, frames that are like picture frames where you can express artistically what you want to convey to a wider community. And then we've done a series of photography exercises where we invite those people to then hold that, whatever those affirmations were, whatever was on those sheets, and then we take a picture where you don't see their face, but you see them holding this in some setting, maybe outdoors somewhere. Those pictures become the galleries.
That's such a cool concept. And then in terms of moving day, can you watch that online?
You can go to our website, just Google The Existence Project, and you can watch the trailer for the movie. And then we have had screenings have actually happened all over the world, and they've happened, some of them like virtually. We will provide the link virtually to groups to watch it, but what we like doing best is going in person, screening the film, and then being there for some kind of discussion afterwards. And we've screened it all over Victoria, but as I said, throughout Canada and actually internationally.
And then also just going back to the music performances, I think this is when I first started at the dock maybe a year ago, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe you had a music performance of someone who was formerly homeless, and I think he played the harmonica, or...
Yeah.
What's that artist's name, and can you talk a bit about that event?
Well, his name is Daniel Morel.
Relax, just have fun.
Yeah.
Just be yourself.
Yeah.
And
problem.
the main thing is just have fun.
Yeah.
And he actually just became a dockhand as of this week.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. He's somebody who I had met originally when he was living in Beacon Hill Park.
Yeah.
He went from a tent to a van, and he was able to live in that van. A church in Saanich invited a couple of the folks who had been in Beacon Hill Park to shelter in their parking lot until there were complaints, and then they couldn't anymore. Daniel currently is precariously housed, but he is the most talented blues harmonica player I've ever known.
Hey guys, my name is Daniel. Inspiration of sad and happy, and I want you to comment. What do you think about this riff? And I want to work on it.
He is literally a genius with that little instrument, which he found on the railroad tracks on a bridge he was sleeping under when he was a homeless youth.
Wow.
When I first met him, he was busking, and he got to a point, he got just so low because, he had been fined and prohibited from busking and had his harmonicas confiscated and just one thing after another. When he started playing again, and we kind of supported that, I was supporting him just as a volunteer. He started busking and going to open stages, and an old blues guy in his early 70s saw how everybody who got up on stage with Daniel, they were just uplifted. And he saw the raw talent there, and so they've formed an act called Big Train.
I'm like really stunned by it whenever we play, and people really, they get it. They get a real cool thing from our bond, and it kind of crosses generations.
They went on tour across BC and Alberta this summer, which was very successful, but it didn't, produce a lot of money. So we're trying to now figure out, how does Daniel find a way to take this incredible talent that he has and, make a living out of it, make a life doing what he loves and what he has amazing talent with. There was a concert. This was not per se an existence project thing. This is somebody who we meet people in the course of doing our work, and also, do volunteering outside of the direct work. The Existence Project will support these efforts. So when I found folks here who wanted to support at the dock, who wanted to support, getting Daniel out there, we created a concert. James from the Downtown Residents Association, who's also officed here at the dock, wrote a grant to do a series of concerts and wanted one of them to feature musicians who had been unhoused. And so Daniel and Lonnie, who is his partner in Big Train, did a set at that. Late last year or early this year, they did another concert at James Bay United Church, and the Existence Project came and filmed and made a couple videos about that, and made a video in anticipation of Big Train's tour to sort of help them publicize that. So informally, we've been supporting that effort. It wasn't really something we had planned out in advance, but organically, that's what landed on our table.
I mean, that's one of the cool stories I've heard. Like, I remember reading about it in the paper, and I think it was just going on just when I first started here. And I just thought it was such a cool way to promote a healthier, maybe, outlook on how things are, and also just showing the potential of how every human being has unlimited potential, no matter what the circumstance.
Also, I truly believe that the vast majority of people in this community want to help and make a positive difference, and are not hearing ways to do that. And I think there's a hunger out there that people want to be given opportunities to make a difference on this issue and other issues, but this is one that's been particularly vexing. It is a crisis that we created. Now we see so much human misery out there, and there's so much judgment on that human misery, but we did not even really use the word homelessness, at least not to mean what it means now, until about 50 years ago. and 40 years ago maybe. And the precursor to that in both the United States and Canada was divesting from social housing. We did not talk about homelessness before we divested from social housing. And so now we've pretty much guaranteed that a certain number of people are going to be homeless. If you show me the statistics on how rents have increased in a community over time, I can pretty much accurately predict what their proportion of homelessness is going to be in that community. It's the housing, stupid. It's the housing. People have always had problems, but it's been the case throughout our history that people with problems can still put a roof over their head for pennies a day or nothing. And that's changed now. And now that we have ensured that, a certain number of people are going to be without housing, we 100% focus our concern on fixing their deficits. You can fix all of their deficits and house them, but there's going to be 10 more people to take their place. The crisis is one that we have created in this community. A place to start for me is to just feel the sadness of this tragedy when we see it out there, rather than starting with judgment or anger. Any number of unproductive responses we can make to this. Just start with feeling the sadness of this tragedy. And I think that's one thing that we help with through the Existence Project in our media work and in our storytelling work, is to really highlight a person as a person. You can feel empathy and compassion towards them as a human and not just look out and see them as a problem. I had met Marco because I knew a little bit about the work of the Existence Project and was working with another organization where I thought there might be some synergies there. Anyway, we'd hit it off, and Marco had a way of, I think, really reaching into the community and seeking folks who were a good fit for the mission of the Existence Project. And so reached out to me, and I ended up here. And one of the things I really appreciated about, the kinds of folks that were gravitating towards working here is that there was an openness towards not just telling this story with compassion, approaching people who are unhoused with compassion and empathy, but also on the flip side, really wanting to tease out and understand what the resistances were in the community to embracing the unhoused community with compassion. And really, in a generative way, engaging with people who are saying, not in my backyard. And people who were saying, I'm scared about what I see going on in my community. Mm-hmm. And rather than rejecting or pushing that away, to just look for new ways to create dialogue and new ways for people to just come to an understanding with each other.
Were you guys involved with creating housing behind certain residence houses that would allow for homeless people to live in certain made for like
backyard cottages?
That's exactly what I was looking for.
We don't do social services or housing.
No.
But one of the stories that we did feature is about the village in Cowichan. And that is a tiny house community that was created up there, not in individual backyards, but it was one central village in Cowichan where people could live together in tiny houses in a community. And I believe we did feature a friend of mine from Seattle named Rex Holbein, who's an architect there, who started an organization called Facing Homelessness, and a project called the Block Project, where he and his daughter, who's also an architect, designed these beautiful off-grid houses that are, about the size of this room we're sitting in, less than 200 square feet, I think about 150 square feet or so. But they're beautifully made. And they're almost entirely off-grid. The city of Seattle couldn't wrap its mind around having a septic field the size of a postage stamp, so they had to hook it up to sewer. But they're collecting rainwater. They're not hooked up to the electrical grid. They're using solar cells.
Wow.
And the concept of the block project was that a homeowner would want to be part of this and would volunteer to be part of this and would meet a person, and when, you know, they establish a relationship and a fit, when it was clear that this person needing housing and this homeowner who had a yard wanted to be in this relationship, then you went around the block to everybody. Mm-hmm. And the original concept, the original idea is, well, everybody, the whole neighborhood, everybody has to agree to this. And they've done this more than a dozen times. I don't know what the count is at now, but Rex's goal was to have this in the backyard of every block in Seattle. You know, we've eased a lot of the restrictions that had prevented these sorts of backyard cottages in communities. Victoria's been really opening up to this concept, much more so, but we have not really embraced it or looked at it as a way of solving homelessness.
So we're building some very cool units of affordable housing, whether they be Tiny Town behind us or some of the new Mears project that opened last week. There's projects popping up all over the place, which is exciting, but like it's simply not nearly enough.
So we did a story on Rex's block project, and I'd love to see us do more about that idea here.
Yeah.
So I think that's one way through.
That was, I just thought that was a very interesting concept. And what are the biggest challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis, either, you know, internally or with, you know, dealing with sort of communities and trying to destigmatize mental health issues?
There's a lot of misunderstanding out there. And with that misunderstanding, all too often comes fear and rejection and just really wanting to protect. We've lived through a really tough 3 or 4 years in the world. All too often, what I've observed is that has led to people becoming more insular and more protective. Mm-hmm. Whereas what I think the invitation of all of this that we've been living through is, and the invitation of all of these crises we're in the midst of, is to open up more to community, to open our arms to each other. And that has often been a challenge to make that case. When that happens, magic happens. Magic can happen in communities. So we're going to keep at it.
And then sort of a more fun question are, you know, what's your favorite thing to do on a day-to-day basis, or on a grander scale, you know, a favorite moment or event that you've maybe done?
Oh, wow. Well, I mentioned that one of the things that I did when I started working on this issue was start a community meal program. And I did it, you know, because I learned that there were nights where there were no meals being offered, and there was a need for it. But I also did it because I just loved cooking for people. And, you know, when I was an undergrad for a couple years, I was a partner in a little hippie restaurant on campus, and just really missed cooking for people. That's my favorite moments, are not just preparing the food, which I love to do, but just having those moments of really genuine organic community emerge when we're breaking bread together. And that's one of the stories that we hope to do in the not too distant future with the Existence Project, is we were one of our community partners who we often seek storytellers through. They do a lot of sort of community dining together, and we're going to, I think, focus on that, how that little simple act of sharing becomes such a conduit for solving all kinds of other things. Just to sit down together and break bread and look at each other in the eye dissolves so much tension and provides an opportunity to really reach deeper into what community could mean. It's a simple place to start.
No, it's good. I mean, I've definitely, even just being here and, you know, going for salad club, or the amount of just little problems I've had solved even by accident because someone was behind me, you know, going, oh, do this, and could be in completely different related fields, but it's cool having that kind of network and support Even if people are doing something completely unrelated to what you're doing, I find like I've learned so much just absorbing, not even trying, but you just sort of absorb it here naturally.
Yeah.
And hopefully with, doing communal dining like that and just having a community in general, that you just help push each other up, So I've just got a couple questions left. The first is, what are your thoughts on the current state of the mental health crisis? Like, given how Victoria is not exactly in the best place right now, to put it lightly.
We were talking a little bit about these last few years that the world has lived through. There's a lot of mental health crisis going on out there. There's a lot of struggle over mental health that's, it by no means is something that's limited to people who are living on the street or people who are struggling in very obvious ways that we see in front of us. People who are housed are very often hiding crises and despair that is every bit as much profound that they're able to just hide behind a closed door. And so it concerns me across the community that we are experiencing a time where people are just feeling unmoored and unsupported and paying a big price in mental health over that. And it's just really difficult to find help these days. Even when you're ready to acknowledge those problems and seek help, that help is hard to find. And that's true, especially profoundly of people who are unhoused and struggling just to make it through day-to-day survival. It's also true of people who maybe have enormous amounts of privilege. I'm very cognizant of we're living through a mental health crisis that is not a crisis just of individuals. It's a crisis of society. The way that we're doing society is pushing more and more of us into suffering and illness. That it's sort of baked into the way that we do society.
How do you think things will look if things continue to progress in a worse way? Say 10 years from now, Victoria continues to take a steep decline.
Well, what they say to individual addicts is that you need to hit your bottom. And when you find what your bottom is, then you'll be ready, to get better. And what we've been discovering, I think, if the last few years has shown us anything, is we seem to always be able to find a lower bottom. So I don't know if we have any concept of just how bad this could get, but I do know that over the course of history, real social change has always grown out of crisis.
The reason why we're here today on the Pandora block is to facilitate the collection or gathering of encampment submissions. The Federal Housing Advocate is quite concerned about encampments as human rights violations, particularly the violation to the right to housing.
So the crisis is also the opportunity to do things differently. And we are at a point where we're seeing that social services, the agencies, the organizations we've charged with helping are not just stretched to the limit, they're starting to snap. Mm-hmm. That means that a lot more is falling through the cracks, but it also means that people living out there and seeing this in their midst have started to take it upon themselves to do something, because it's become clear that help is not coming. Help is not arriving from the outside. So, for instance, when the pandemic began, some of the sheltering restrictions outdoors were relaxed and people were living in Beacon Hill Park, but the outreach worker presence was very sporadic. A number of us who just didn't know what else to do just started wandering into the park. And when we started wandering into the park and just asking people, what do you need, and is there anything we can help with, we also started meeting each other. housed neighbors started meeting each other. Then we decided we should start meeting with each other more formally because, we were helping some of the same folks and we needed to coordinate those efforts. And almost 4 years later, we still meet once or twice a month, either in person or online. People who had never even thought much about the issue of homelessness, or certainly never felt that this was an issue that they would gravitate towards being involved in, are now dedicated and deeply involved in helping. And that's what my hope is for us over the coming years, is that not that the cavalry is going to ride in and fix this, but that people living in this community are going to embrace more and more taking things into their hands to help fix their community, and to keep that pressure on our institutions and to reinvest our energies in ending this crisis once and for all. But it's going to take not just the institutions who are charged with it. It's going to take not just individuals helping people one person at a time. It's going to take all of this together.
This is hopefully a fun theoretical question. How would you change things personally if you had enough resources within reason? So you don't have unlimited resources, but within reason, how would you personally adjust or change things?
I would certainly make it much easier for communities and individuals who want to help to be able to do so without impediments. So, for instance, in this city, to have some kind of place where if people are going to be still sheltering outdoors, where they can be gathered to do it in safety. First and foremost, that we do no harm, because we are doing tremendous harm to people who are sheltering outdoors right now, through enforcement, through bylaw and the police, and through the way we talk about this in media and on social media, the dehumanizing way that we talk about this. So that is the first thing that I would change, is that we just have the full realization that these are our sisters and brothers. Most of us are much closer to this circumstance than we would like to admit. And that maybe some of the anger around this is through our unconscious realization of that. That's where I would start, is just for us to, as a community, look on this issue with compassion. And I think the other solutions will flow from that.
And then my second to last question is, do you have an optimistic outlook on the future?
Yes. I mean, I'm a realist, and I do recognize that in so many ways, with so many crises that we're facing simultaneously, that things could go from bad to worse very quickly.
Yeah, we saw that. Oh boy, yeah.
We've seen that a lot. But I also know, from being a student of social change, significant change always comes out of crisis. And if there's anything we have an abundance of right now, it's crisis. There's so much that's not working right now, and I can feel that there is less inclination to be accepting of that. But, we are, for instance, our healthcare system right now. I moved to Canada 6 years ago, and I was just shocked. I was expecting, I moved from a country where they're just going to bankrupt you. You're going to get the medical care, they're just going to bankrupt you, to a place where, nobody's asking me to pay any bills. This is great, but we're not doing healthcare right now. And something's going to have to give.
And the thing with healthcare is, you have to be your own biggest advocate. But it was crazy. Like, I heard a story of someone who had a heart attack waiting to get in the hospital in emergency, and he died.
Yeah, I think I read the same story.
Yeah. So, and that was not that long ago. That was 4 or 5 months ago. And I've heard, similar, not to that degree, but, waiting for a week to, get a bed kind of thing.
Yeah, and I don't want to, underestimate our ability to allow things to go from bad to worse to worse to worse. As a species, it seems to be our tendency is to push things until it's almost too late, and then to do something. Well, we're kind of at almost too late right now. So that's, I guess, if anything, that is kind of a backdoor way of getting to optimism, but just that we are at such a state of crisis right now. And I'm seeing inklings like the neighborhood group that I described when we started going into the park. NSUN is what we're called, by the way, Neighborhood Solidarity with Unhoused Neighbors. Just seeing more and more efforts like that is what gives me optimism. That, I had this t-shirt, we're the ones we've been waiting for.
And did you just have any thoughts or words you wanted to share for anybody watching or listening?
I just kind of like that one. We're the ones we've been waiting for.